An official welcome to our audience today. Thank you for being with us, joining us. We're also fortunate to have Malcolm Taylor join us today as part of the Plymouth Historical Society's latest initiative, Memories of Plymouth. Thank you, Tink. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here.
We're going to be asking you today to share with us some of your stories, your memories, your thoughts about the town of Plymouth and surrounding areas. This is important to all of us when we think about what community is. So let's begin. It's two phases. The first phase, I'll be asking you questions about who you are a little bit, because we have people in the community that know you very, very well, and we have some folks that have heard of you, and we have other folks that, who is this man? Who is this man? Second set of questions will be more about events, taking you back a decade here, a couple decades there. So if we can, let's begin. Please state your complete formal name.
Malcolm Tink Taylor. I took Tink, it's a nickname, but I took it many, many years ago when I ran for office because people didn't know who Malcolm was. They thought they were voting for my father. When they said, no, Tink is the one I want to go down to the legislature, not his father. So I went over to Grafton County Probate Court and I took Tink as a middle name.
That was my second question, so I guess I don't have to ask you why.
You didn't ask me how I got Tink, right?
Absolutely. Where were you born?
Born in Rochester, New York. So I'm only a semi-native.
And we can discuss, people that are listening, is he a townie or not? We'll wait for a few more minutes.
Technically, I'm a semi-native.
All right, all right. When did you move here?
I, of course, came as a child. We came summers and on and on and on. When I turned 18, I moved back to New Hampshire. I'd like to say back to New Hampshire. And I've been here ever since. So
very nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mom and Dad, would you like to mention them?
My father's from Taunton, Massachusetts. My mother was from Brookline, Massachusetts. Helen and Malcolm, what else would it be? Malcolm Taylor. And so they're natives of Massachusetts. But they happened to be living in Rochester, where my father was working at Eastman Kodak Company.
Wow.
And starting into the war years, he was very much involved in developing photographic paper, which had resolution, and you could see little German things on it. So that was why he was with Eastman Kodak Company. Spent 42 years with Eastman Kodak. And then I moved here when I was 18, and they followed me about 10 years later, and they retired.
Here?
So they came back, yes.
That's great. That's great. Are you a singleton child? Do you have brothers and sisters?
No brothers or sisters.
No brothers or sisters. Did you wouldn't have had any education in Plymouth?
No education in Plymouth other than Plymouth State College.
Plymouth State College. So we're talking about what years were you were here?
We're talking probably the 60s. Mid to late 60s. In and out. I was taking courses at university. I was in the state police for a while, and they sent me, and I took some courses down in Durham. And then I finished up here and graduated here in Plymouth in 65.
In 65. 65.
Yeah.
So that leads us into our next question or request. Would you please talk about some of the jobs that you have held over the decades?
Well, when I came out of high school, I had no desire at all to go on to college. I wanted a break. 12 years of education, formal education. I need a break, so I went into the Coast Guard. I was in the United States Coast Guard for a while. I came out of the Coast Guard, did a couple of other things, and then took the exam for state police. Went on to New Hampshire State Police. State Police sent me to Durham and took courses, and I got very interested in the academic side of things. And I came out of there, and when I finished Plymouth, I taught high school for a while. Interlakes in Meredith. Did my student teaching in Laconia under Don Piper, who was the principal down there. And then I went to Interlakes and was at Interlakes for a very short period of time. I never worked so hard in my life as I did teaching in high school. I had 5 separate preparations to do for every day.
What's that adage? If you can't do anything else, you teach, and people don't understand how
they
difficult?
They don't understand that because it was rough. I would come home, I was in my mid-20s, and I would come home after a day of teaching. I would sit down in my chair, I would fall asleep. I was exhausted. 5 separate preparations every day, taught mostly history. Then we had a thing called civics. We don't teach that anymore.
No, very, very.
I don't know if we're teaching history, but anyway, we were not teaching civics or social studies. And I was basically a talker and a lecturer. I didn't want them to get out their workbooks and do pages 42 to 49 while I sat in the front of the room. No. We talked. We had conversations. So I was very fortunate. They made me Teacher of the Year award. First time a first-year teacher got to be Teacher of the Year.
Oh, I'm impressed.
And they've just, the class has just had its 50th anniversary, and I was invited as the guest of honor. Oh. It's less than a month ago now.
Congratulations.
Yeah, middle of June. Yes.
That is really exciting.
Yeah.
So you reached.
How much fun it is to come back and see all your students. What are you doing now? Well, I'm working for Google. I'm doing this. I'm drilling wells. I'm doing this. Everyone. We went down the line.
But I hope they had name tags on.
Most of them did. Yes. It's well, no, I was able. You're able to recognize them.
That's great.
Sometimes you say, "Oh, you're." Don't tell me now. You're. Oh, yes, you were. Yes, I know who you are. You know, that sort of thing.
Did you take out a yearbook and study before?
The yearbook was there with my dedication in it, and it was very, very nice. Jerry Thomas was one of my star students. He's this Thomas Well Company. They drill wells in Meredith, and we had the whole afternoon of it, and a feed and everything else. It was a great time.
That is fun. So, that is so fun.
Yes.
Oh, that's a wonderful. That's a wonderful.
Sort of like going to over-the-hill troopers meetings that I go to. You know, old state troopers. You know.
So how did you? Why did you decide to leave teaching? What did you move into?
I moved into journalism. The teaching thing there was a lot of mechanics with it. There's a lot of it was tough to. I wanted to teach. I didn't want to be selling magazine subscriptions. I didn't want to be, you know, raising money for the local. I wanted to teach, and it wasn't. I guess in a way it was too intense, but in other respects it wasn't. So I got into journalism. I had taken a couple of journalism courses, but was not really a full-fledged writer. And Doris Werland at the Plymouth Record, she said, "Come on in." She said, "We're talking about adopting an editorial policy. We've never had an editorial policy before. We've always just run local news and local correspondence, sending in town events and stuff like that. We want to have an editorial policy. We want to start taking positions on things." So I helped them develop that. Bob Werland was there, her son. And oh my God, heavens, the whole crew, you know, it was a lot of fun. And,
what was the paper called at that time?
Plymouth Record / Ashland Citizen.
I wonder if people can recall Ashland Citizen.
Halfway through the run, they had a press out there. They used to shake the building when the press ran. Ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. And these papers would come out of the press. And halfway through the run, we'd shut the press down, stop the ink, stop the rotors going, and we would take out, in those days it was letterpress, and you could take out the slug that said Plymouth Record, and you'd take out this lead thing, and you'd set off to the side, and you'd bring in one that would say Ashland Citizen, put it in there, ink it up, start the press going, and that was the Ashland Citizen. It was the same paper, only the heading changed. It's Ashland Citizen.
First floor, office, I walk into, and then what was behind the office?
Behind the office was the makeup rooms, composing, and some of the, I guess there was a small press there. That was a small press for doing jobs like stationery and stuff like that. It was a Heidelberg Press, I remember it.
I don't know what that means.
The rollers come ahead, and then the ink comes over, then the roller comes back. It was for doing small jobs.
And then on the second floor?
On the second floor was were more presses. And then out back, the furthest out back, that room had to be added on. That was a web leader press. That was the real thing. I mean, that shook the whole neighborhood when that went off.
Was this a full-time position for you?
That was, yes, it was.
And how long did you stay there?
Oh, I stayed there for 5 or 6 years, I think it was. Yeah.
And from there?
And from there, let's see, what year are we up to now? We're up into the mid-70s, I guess. I did some work for the National Geographic Society. The Werlands were very kind to me because they let me have summers off, which allowed me to go to the Yukon and go to Alaska and to go into Arctic Canada for the National Geographic Society.
And how did you get acquainted with them?
I was introduced to the National Geographic Society through Bradford Washburn, a summer resident on Squam Lake who was director of the Museum of Science in Boston. and he was doing a map of Squam Lake. You know, I think it's very commonly known around here. Everywhere you go are these beautiful maps of Squam Lake. And Brad Washburn was doing those. It was sort of a fun project that he wanted to do. We've often said that Squam is probably the best map lake in America. With all the depths and with all the islands, it's all done to first order surveying.
Wow.
And he said, I am going to lead an expedition to the Yukon. And I said, well, that's interesting. What is that all about? He said, the Canadian Parliament has dedicated a mountain in memory of John F. Kennedy. I said, isn't that very nice? He said, and the National Geographic Society has been contacted by Prime Minister Lester Pearson, who wants to have the whole area explored, mapped, photographed. In other words, we want to make it known that we have done this. So for the Prime Minister of Canada, in contact with the National Geographic Society, in turn calls the Museum of Science in Boston, because the director of the Museum of Science in Boston, when he was a young man, did some climbing in the Yukon, the St. Elias mountain range, the Hubbard glaciers, all that stuff. So Washburn knew the territory. So I said, I am going to lead this expedition. How would you like to go? I said, I would like to go. My climbing experience is rather limited to the White Mountains. You know, I've not done anything on that scale before. I'm not that familiar with the Yukon, and I certainly have not been an expedition person. But we're talking about 50 or 60 people going on this thing, and there has to be food, and there's the logistics. How are we going to get this food up onto the glaciers and onto the mountain? They're going to have to establish a base camp and an advanced base camp, and then there's have to be a high camp. How high is Mount Kennedy? Oh, the mountain has no name, but we're going to name it Kennedy, and it's about a little under 14,000 feet. I said, well, maybe that won't be a problem. The elevation's not that high, but it's a difficult mountain. It's never been climbed. With all of that, I'm off. And with Washburn, you know, it's, can you leave next Wednesday for Whitehorse in the Yukon Territory? So I went up there. I've given these talks all around the area. A lot of the people here have seen my slides on it. It was a spectacular trip. It was a lot of fun, and that's what got me going with the National Geographic Society, and that led to another job and another job, and I finally phased out of that and went back to journalism. This time for the other Citizen out of Laconia.
Laconia.
Citizen Publishing Company in Laconia.
And is that where you retired from?
Well, yeah, I don't really retire from
I was just going to.
I fade away, but I don't retire. And I worked for Larry and Alma Smith in Laconia, very much like the Whirlins, you know, old newspaper people. They love the business. They love Laconia. And they'd been looking at Plymouth for years and said, you know, we have readers up there. We have people up there who read our paper. But maybe if we had more news coming out of Plymouth and Thornton and Campton and Holden and so on, maybe, just maybe, we can increase our circulation. So I opened up an office. First of all, it was where the Deachman Law office is now. I forget the name of that block there. And then we moved up over Wolfson's Jewelers. And at one point there were 3 of us working out of that office. Wow. There was me, and I had my assistant, Dan Billen, and then Anita Swanson came after Dan Billen, and then we had a circulation advertising guy, 3 of us working on it. And it took off. Suddenly Plymouth people were subscribing to what was the Laconia Citizen, later became the Citizen.
The Citizen.
Get Laconia on it. It was a Laconia Evening Citizen, actually. And they changed the name, and I did that for a long time.
You stated you were in the service. Would you like to share anything about your time in the service?
It was a very short term in the Coast Guard. I spent most of my time at Cape May, New Jersey, which is sort of the headquarters for the Coast Guard. But I learned a lot of boating skills that I was able to use years later. I mean, everything from knots and seamanship and weather. And it was interesting how I got into the Coast Guard, because I was still in New York at the time, just finishing school. And because I hadn't showed any desire to go on to college, the draft. And we had a very good friend who was on the local draft board, Frank Ferris, and he said to me, I probably shouldn't be saying this, but we're into the T's now, and Taylorta, it's the beginning of the T's. you are probably going to be receiving a draft notice within 6 weeks. And I said to myself, do I want to go into the Army and learn how to fire howitzers, or how to take down an M1 rifle and put it back together blindfolded? Do I want to do that? Or would I rather do something more useful, more beneficial? I know. I'll apply to the Coast Guard. I went to the local Coast Guard recruiting station on Lake Ontario, of all places. 24 hours later, I was in the Coast Guard. Pending a physical examination, of course. Mm-hmm. You're accepted, but you have to pass the physical. I went in the Coast Guard, I loved it. And all those skills I've used all my life, splicing and knots, and you know, it goes on and on and on. And years later, while I was teaching school, of course, the summertime, I was working on the Marine Patrol in New Hampshire. And, you know, I knew all that stuff.
That's great. That's great.
If there's one thing in my life, and I've done so many things that almost looks like I couldn't hold a job. I've done so many things, but it's amazing how they've all melded into each other. The Coast Guard works into this, and the National Geographic Society, right, and then go into journalism, from journalism into politics, and go into the legislature. It all seemed to have flowed together. That's the only justification for doing all of these weird things that I've been doing.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about your background for the audience that may know, they just know of you. Now they should know a little bit more about you. Let's talk about being in Plymouth. You did not live in Plymouth, but you've spent so much of your time here, socially, professionally, with a job, etc. So I'm going to ask you to reflect a little bit just about being here, day by day by day. Are there special things that come to mind? Why you like the town of Plymouth? What have you enjoyed here? Are there people that you have met that have influenced you somehow?
I always saw Plymouth as sort of my second hometown. You know, Holderness, of course, was it. Happy memories, the lake, and growing up in Holderness. But Plymouth was sort of my second hometown. It's where we always came. It was the center of our lives, really. I mean, whether we were going to the movies, or we were going to go to Fauci's Diner, or we were coming over to the bandstand concerts on the Common, or coming to work here, everybody I knew. So this was really the center, the cultural center, sort of the emotional center of our life. And Plymouth always says, as you come into Plymouth, and even visitors who've never been here before come in, they'd look and they'd say, oh, this is sort of it is the quintessential New England town.
Yes.
There's the Common, the bandstand, there's Main Street, there's the post office. I mean, what more could you ask for? Even though the liquor store was there too, you know.
It was,
oh, yes.
in many places.
And so I always sort of saw Plymouth as the quintessential the Yankee town.
If you think about childhood memories that may be affiliated with Plymouth, I'm going to bring some to light, and if there's something that you can recall, please share. I have the weather on my list. I have fires that you would associate with Plymouth on the list, fairs that we've had here over time. Many of the audience folks might recall that Plymouth was the oldest fair that we had in the state until it went down. Are there certain events that you can recall with friends or with families that you'd like to bring up now?
Well, right after I got out of the state police, Bernie Gray, the police chief, hired me. I was taking courses at Plymouth. I wasn't going full-time, but I was taking courses at Plymouth Teachers College, I guess as it was called. No, it had just gone to Plymouth State College in those. So I worked nights on the Main Street. There wasn't a lot to do back in the 60s, you know. There wasn't that much crime going on. And so I sort of what was called the night watch, from 4 till midnight at night. And I was actually able to study. I was able to go over to the police station, which is in the basement of what is the town hall now. Because I remember it as the courthouse. It was the Grafton County Courthouse. And so I would go there, and I would sit at the desk, and I would read some of my books I was supposed to be reading, doing some of my studies, and there was a little light that would go on. The light was in front of what would now be, it was just about where the diner is. There's a little light that would blink, and that would mean that I should answer the telephone. So if I'm out on the street walking, checking doors, we checked doors in those days. I don't, police don't think they do that anymore. We had a real presence in Plymouth, you know. Bernie was basically, I want you on Main Street, I want you out, I want you where people can see you, I want you chatting with people. You know, we got to mix it up with the town. So Now they ride through in their cruisers and they wave, you know. So this little light would blink, so I have to run over to the station and pick up the phone, and that would be my call. I used my own automobile. I had a Jeep station wagon. We had to use our own car. I don't even recall we got mileage. I can recall bringing people in, booking people in, and bringing them in my own automobile.
Oh my.
So I mean, that's how informal it was.
I'm going to interject, and I don't really do this, but you talk about walking the main street. I can remember living on the main street, and my father forgot to lock the door. So they came, checked it, and called Norman Samaha and said, you need to get down there and you need to lock the door.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, no. You get people out of bed in the middle of the night, they never forgot to lock the door again, did they? At 3 o'clock in the morning, you come down here and I'm going to wait on you.
Wow.
You come down here and lock this door.
That's funny.
Oh, yes.
That's funny.
So I got to know a lot of the merchants doing that. And I used to go down through the alleys, checking the doors. And
that's important for a sense of security, is it not?
It is.
To see you.
There's no substitute for foot patrol.
Okay.
In any town. You need foot patrol. You really do.
Interesting.
Of course, I'd come out of the state police after 4 years, and that was all in automobile, except for putting on snowshoes and going up to check on camps that were closed for the winter. Other than that, it was all automobile. You worked out of your automobile, you lived out of your automobile. So it was so nice to be able to walk up and down around the main street. So
did they finally give you a vehicle?
No, no. I think eventually the town bought its own cruiser, and after Bernie retired. So
interesting.
What a sweet guy he was.
Can you remember any birthdays or weddings or passings of people that affected you at all during your growing up years, childhood?
In Plymouth?
In Plymouth.
I can't.
Okay.
I can't remember any.
No, that's fine.
You've drawn a blank on me.
Well, I think sometimes we always say, do you remember where you were when?
Oh, yes.
John F. Kennedy, we're talking about a national event.
Yes.
Where were you at 9/11? Or where were you when John F. Kennedy passed away? Or other kinds of things like that. Or one of the best times of your life. Was there a wedding? Was there somebody?
I do remember the JFK assassination.
Can I ask you, as a child, then, where were you?
I was in the old Lamson Library, the old, what is it called now, where the library used to be.
It'll come.
Not Lamson, it was called...
Reed Hall?
Yeah, no, not Reed. I can't think of it.
Okay.
That's now where they have meetings and things in the basement. You know, it's right there on Highland Street. They've got a new name for it. That's where I was sitting. I can close my eyes. I know what table I was at, and I know who I was talking to. When the word came down that the President of the United States had been assassinated in Dallas, Texas. And of course, years later, when I'm on the Mount Kennedy expedition, it all comes back to me. There's more of this sort of stuff running together in my life.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wow, wow. Over the years that you've worked here, socialized here, what changes have you seen? What changes have you seen? Think of when you first moved here, worked here, now, 2017.
All the
physical changes, perhaps.
All of the commercial activity was on Main Street and around the Common. This was it. Now, of course, it's moved out with Walmarts and with other businesses. Hannaford, Carl Adams Market that was where you went for your food. There's nowhere else. There was an A&P down on Main.
Which turned into
Rite Aid.
First National.
First National.
First National.
And then it went to Rite Aid.
Very good. Yeah. Very good.
So you had the two. I guess they were in competition, but it almost didn't seem like it at the time. What a worker Carl was. He'd be in there. And it'd be Friday night was the night, you know. And the cars were parked too deep, and people were in there. And Carl used to lug the groceries out for the people. Here's the owner of the market, lugging out bags and bags of food, and some of them were parked over by the post office and by the bank. And Kenny Bartlett would come down from the bank.
Right.
So, but now, of course, now it's I don't want to say diversified. Now it's dispersed. Now you have people who drive from Plymouth to Tilton to shop at Market Basket. That would never have happened back then.
But Friday also was hopping because of the summer folks.
Yes.
The people on the camps, etc.
Yes. As a young boy, when I was 16, I ran the mailboat around Squam Lake. And not only did we deliver mail, but we delivered groceries. And some of the groceries would come from Carl Adams. Some of them would come from John Romani. Some of them would come from Smith Piper. So when we would go and we would deliver these parcels of milk. And
that's great.
It's great.
And our population has just increased so much.
It's increased, yeah.
Mostly due to the campus, I would assume. Yeah. Are there people in town or surrounding areas that have affected you when growing up? Did you have a mentor? Somebody that meant a lot to you, that supported you in what you wanted to do?
Well, in most of the jobs that I've held, and including my military experience, state police, you may remember Ray Welch.
Absolutely.
Trooper Ray Welch.
Absolutely.
And Ray, he showed me an awful lot about what it takes to be a responsible state trooper.
Did he have certain qualities? I mean, why you listened to him, what it meant to have him say those things to you?
Well, it was just the way he was able to react to the public. People would come to him with problems, or people who were outside the law. Just the way he was able to handle one situation after another, after another. I said to myself, someday I hope I can be that good.
Great. That's beautiful.
Ray was quite a guy. And Stuart Courier, he was our sergeant. And in those days, you know, the sergeant really was the troop commander, you know. They didn't have lieutenants and captains. They had one captain. It was a small organization when I was only about 60 troopers in the whole state.
And to help the audience out, 60 then, how many would we have today?
I think there are about 160 now.
Right.
I may be off on that, but there are quite a few. And they start them now at $60,000, plus all of the benefits. I think I started at $3,900. $3,900 a year.
$3,900. Full time then?
Oh yes.
Oh.
More than full time. You were subject to call, and then 24-hour a day call. You're on call. Therefore, you could take your cruiser anywhere you went. If I decided to go to a movie, I took my cruiser. If I decided to go fishing, I took my cruiser. If I decided to take a friend of mine and we were going to go down to Laconia, we took the cruiser. You were to have your cruiser with you at all times because you're subject to 24-hour call.
Is that changed? Is that the same today?
I don't know if they're still doing that or not.
Okay, okay. Celebrations. Can you recall celebrations that you were part of, perhaps? We can go back to 1963, our bicentennial.
I remember that. I was not as involved in that as I was the 250th.
Would you share?
Actually, I was on the committee for the 250th. Somebody from Holderness being on the Plymouth 250th Celebration Committee, but there were some of us, you know.
I'll put my hand up from Holderness. Absolutely, absolutely. Because we spend so much time, or were born here.
Oh yes, that was a lot of fun.
It was wonderful.
Yeah,
it was wonderful.
I'm trying to think what other celebrations there might have been. I don't remember the end of World War II because I wouldn't have been here then.
Okay.
There was definitely would have been a celebration for that.
Would we have done anything here in the area during the Korean War, at the end of the Korean War, at the end of the Vietnam War that you can recall?
I don't require the Vietnam, and in Plymouth, I don't require anything at the end of the Korean War. I do recall the Vietnam War wasn't that popular, but Plymouth was one of the few campuses where there was no protests. There was no protesting going on when the Vietnam War was underway.
Recall.
It's very quiet.
Right.
Very quiet.
I know they protested during Kent State, that event.
Yes, they did.
But nothing after that. Was there a person in your family or even in the town that influenced you greatly as a child? And this could be a little bit repetitive, but I want to make sure that family part is there. Is there someone in your family that just meant, of course, all our members do.
Oh, yes, yes.
But some that maybe supported you, made suggestions that you incorporated in your life later on that you didn't know was...
Well, I'd have to probably choose my grandfather, the Reverend Malcolm Taylor. He's my grandfather. See, we had Malcolm Taylor, and Malcolm Taylor, 3 generations. That's how Tink became UP. That's the only way they knew who they were talking about. Yes, he was. And he was pastor in Brookline, Massachusetts. In the summertime, he came here. I stayed with him when I came. And he was a summer pastor at St. Peter's in the Mount on Shepherd Hill in Holderness. So the interesting thing is, back before I was born, he used to preach Sundays at the Profile House in Franconia Notch. It's a big hotel, right in the middle of Franconia Notch. And he would come to Plymouth, and he probably came, well, let's see, in the 20s. I guess he had an automobile then, but he would come to Plymouth to take the train to Lincoln. You would take the train from Plymouth to Lincoln, and from Lincoln to the profile house, they had a stagecoach. The locals called it the Profile House. I don't know how that came, but it was the Profile House. He always said, "I'm going to the Profile House." So
this is during the 20s.
Yeah,
1920s,
yeah. And
1920s.
It burned at some point. Yes.
Let's get a little bit local if we can. Are there restaurants in the area? Are there foods that you can remember that, wow, I just had this and this is amazing and no one could ever replicate it? Do you remember some of the restaurants that may not be here now but were then, and the foods that you would?
All I remember is that the amount of time that we spent at Fausti's, and though it might not have been Epicurean, it was good.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember the roast beef dinners that he put out there. It's $1.25, and there's a slab of nice red roast beef with mashed potatoes. It was your standard roast beef dinner, but it almost hung over the plate. It was such a big piece. It's $1.25.
$1.25.
When I was a state trooper, I ate there. When I was in the Marine Patrol, I ate there. You know.
Sorry.
And then there was Blake's.
Blake's restaurant.
Blake's is where I think the Rotary was meeting at Blake's, so I used to eat there. Nothing memorable about that.
All right. I remember the donuts.
Oh yes.
At Fausti's.
Oh yes.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Who could forget Anderson's Bakery and the smell of fresh bread coming out of there? At 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, you could smell the bread.
4 or 5 in the morning?
In the morning when they're baking bread. Tommy Anderson is down there. And it was a real bakery. They did everything they sold, they made there.
Did you have a best friend? During schooling, afterwards, did you have a best friend that you did everything with?
Not really. There was a group of us.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. And why did you have that group together? What brought you together? What was the commonality amongst you?
Probably our love of the outdoors, the love of the lake, just common interests.
Okay.
Being an only child, you know, I was able to just sort of pick and choose who my associates would be. I wasn't locked into anything, so I had the freedom of being able to do that. So
I'll be interviewing someone in the near future that have been best friends since kindergarten time. Any of your best friends from way back still you associate with today?
I can't remember them.
All right.
I can't remember them.
Okay.
I do remember my kindergarten teacher,
oh.
but I don't remember the kids.
Okay.
Well, there was one kid that came through school with me, James Crawford, who we grew up together, and he eventually became the pastor of Old South Church in Boston.
In Boston,
yes.
Right.
He's 6'10". One of the few people I've had to do this to when I talk. He's enormous. He's still coming. He has a camp on Squam Lake, and I see him occasionally.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I think my parents got married in the Old South Church after World War II, immediately in September of 45.
I probably haven't been as good at staying in contact with them as I should have been.
I'm putting my finger at you.
Occasional reunions, but I don't make too many of them.
Let's see. I have a question, and you may pass on this. Can you recollect any political upheavals, you being involved with the state police in the town, local, state, national, that have affected you? Political upheavals that you heard about, perhaps, were involved with, perhaps, at the state level, at the local level, at the national level? Anything that affected you?
I was in graduate school at Michigan State University when Kent State happened. And I can remember lying in my bed at night hearing glass smash. They took over the administration building, and mass march. Michigan State University is in East Lansing, but it's only a short distance from Lansing, which is the capital. And the march on the State House in Lansing, I remember that. I was in the legislature at the time that Mel Thompson was governor of New Hampshire. He was very controversial. Axe the tax.
Axe the tax, I was going to say the same.
Axe the tax. And the last thing we need in this state is government. You know, government is the problem. You know, that's the conservative mantra, that we got to get rid of government, and we're overtaxing these people. People are leaving New Hampshire because they're being overtaxed, and we got to do something about it. That's the reason why we don't have a sales or an income tax today, probably. So I remember there was a lot but then Hugh Gallen was able to defeat him. And Hugh Gallen from Littleton, and I knew Hugh very well. And I was most concerned when I went to Concord. The reason I ran for the legislature is because the wetlands were being destroyed. People were filling them in and dredging them and doing away with the wetlands, and we knew how important wetlands are to the water table, wildlife, habitat, on and on. And that's why I ran for the legislature. And I got a bill through the House and through the Senate, and Mel Thompson said the last thing we need is more government. And we're not going to regulate our wetlands, and he vetoed the bill. So I had to run a second time. I ran the second time. Hugh Gallen was the governor. House went through the House on a voice vote. They didn't even ask for a roll call.
Wow.
All in favor, aye. All opposed, no. So New Hampshire had a wetlands protection bill, finally into law. Hugh Gallen calls me and he said, "I'm about to sign your bill into law. Did you want to have a signing ceremony?"
That's neat.
So that was sort of one of the few accomplishments I
Very nice.
down there. It's hard to get anything through the legislature.
Can you give us a timeline to that, when that occurred?
That would have been in the mid-'70s.
Mid-'70s.
I first put the bill in. I ran for the Constitutional Convention, 16th Constitutional Convention, got elected to that. I tried to amend the Constitution in a couple of places, and it didn't fly. And then I put my bill in, the Wetlands Protection Act, as I called it, House Bill 693. And then I had to run again in '76 in order to do it again. And so 74, we're talking about 74 to 78 was when I was down there. I wasn't not going to make a career out of the New Hampshire legislature.
My next question, do you have memories of companies? We've done some restaurants, but downtown stores perhaps, industries that have come and gone. Did any excite you when they came? And maybe did any sadden you when they left? Were you surprised that something left after decades of being here?
Of course, Newberry's was always fun.
Thanks.
You could get anything you wanted. I have a power drill at home today that I bought in Newberry's in the '60s. It's a skill, I think it is, and I bought that at Newberry's. But you could buy anything in there. It was your typical five and dime. I don't know why they call them five and dime stores. I guess that's originally started out as five and dime stores. I remember Newberry's. What else has come and gone? There have been some attempts at bookstores. It always amazed me that Plymouth always has had to struggle with keeping bookstores going.
I'm not sure it's Plymouth, but I've seen that in other stores, other towns
It's
around.
the only college town that I know of in America that doesn't have a bookstore. Yeah. And we've had the Book Exchange, and we've had other bookstores have come and gone, and for some reason the bookstores just don't make it here. So, so I was a little surprised when the Book Exchange left. It's been fun to watch Fraser's Diner, all the reinventions that has been through. And I think Fraser, he owned a gun shop right next door too.
That was Mr. Guinan?
That was Guinan?
I think so.
No, this was...
Right next door was his brother. That was Henry Fraser.
Yeah.
And he had a hardware store.
Yes, and he sold firearms. Yes.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, yes.
Yes,
Henry
good.
Fraser, yes.
Good. Yeah.
And I remember the Hatch Dairy people. They were out where Hannaford is. What's the name of that shopping mall?
But do you remember it as a farm?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. With retail, home delivery, cottage cheese, ice cream, heavy cream.
Wow.
In those days, you know, when you opened a bottle of milk, the top of the bottle was the cream. And sometimes the bottle was shaped so that the cream went into this little...
I think I'm remembering a Bob Carroll that would drop it off at our house on Pleasant Street.
Yeah.
And the next, so many days later, they'd come back and get the glass.
Yeah, of course, it's the Hatch Plaza today. That's what it's called. Hatch Dairy.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Did you bring an artifact for us that you might want to share?
No, this is something else.
All
this
right.
is a
Okay.
this is an issue of the New Hampshire Archaeologist magazine, which talks about industrial archaeology. It's sort of an oxymoron. We're talking about industrial archaeology, the Industrial Revolution, the old factories, you know, the glass making, the brick making, the wrought iron, everything. I'm doing that in connection with the bridge up at Livermore Falls.
Could you explain a little bit more about that?
I'm trying to get enough interest up so that we can save the old wrought iron bridge at Livermore Falls. It's built by the three towns, Campton, Holderness, and Plymouth paid to build it. I think it's like $7,100 or something, what it costs.
I'm going to ask a silly question. What do you want to do with this bridge when it's
I
done?
want to make it a walking bridge so people can walk out over the gorge and can look down and can see the rainbows, and they can see the water coming down, and they can see the geology there.
Do we have something like this in New Hampshire right now?
I'm not aware of it. I suppose the flumes come sort of close. There's a boardwalk that goes up to the flume in Franconia, if you've been up there, and that's very spectacular. I think the Livermore Falls Gorge is probably the second most spectacular geological formation in New Hampshire that is accessible. You know, there are a lot of very spectacular places in this state, geologically speaking, but this is so easy to get there from the Holderness side, from the Campton side. There it is. There used to be a mill there. We've now gotten the state of New Hampshire to come out. It's the newest state park in New Hampshire. We have parking for 78 cars. We have an attendant there. The beach has been opened in Holderness. The Campton side is being worked on now. More parking. We're going to acquire some additional land. You'll be able to park there and go. But I want to be able to walk out on that bridge and say, wow, look at this.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Exciting. So we heard this on PBTV.
Yes. This is where you heard it first, right here. Yes.
Is that it? I have a last question, but prior to the last question, is there anything else you'd like to share about the time that you have spent in Plymouth, the people that you have met in Plymouth? And everything I try to do during the interviews is to share what a special place Plymouth is. Why did you know Plymouth was right for you?
Well, I don't know. It just, from day one, it just seemed I seemed to fit. You know, I just liked the town. I liked the way it was being run. I liked the people that made up the town. That's not an easy question to answer, because there's some towns when you go in, okay, but you know, what time are we leaving? With Plymouth, you just got here and you just said, oh, I'm back. Here I am.
You're comfortable.
Yeah, it's some of my early childhood experiences. I mean, I can remember the train getting off here at the railroad station, which is now the senior center. I still call it the railroad station.
And the train was named?
Train would come in. Well, it could be the Alouette, but it could be a local from Boston.
Okay.
Because the Alouette went all the way through to Montreal. Can you imagine if we had that service today? From Montreal to Boston by way of Plymouth?
Wow.
What it would mean for the area?
Wow.
And Louis Francesco had his bowling alleys in the basement of the railroad station. You remember that? And he moved them all to Holderness.
He moved them to Holderness. When did he do that? Because I remember bowling over
that
there.
had to be in the late 50s. I remember them building the bowling alley in the 50s. So I'll just guess and say maybe 58 or 59 is when Louis moved the bowling alleys from the basement of the Plymouth Railroad Station. The Plymouth Railroad Station had won some architectural awards. It was quite a very fortunate and foresightful of the town not to rip it down. Thanks to Norman Perry and the lamp factory.
That's right. That's right.
So many towns now are kicking themselves, saying, "Oh, we tore it down." Look at Concord. That was a classic railroad station. It could have been. It could have been a marketplace, meeting place. It was the center of Concord. They ripped it down. Manchester ripped it down. Nashville tore it down. New York City, Penn Station, they tore it down. It was a world-class depot, and they tore it down. Now they're wishing they hadn't. But Laconia, Plymouth, there are other towns kept them up. Conway,
that's exciting.
Gorham. So the towns with the foresight kept their railroad stations, because guess what? Someday, just maybe, there's that outside chance that we may get rail transportation back in this state.
I think I know your views on this.
New Hampshire struggles with the rail thing. It struggles with it.
When we talk about community, for me, it's really the young folks. So if you had a group of young folks in front of you right now, and we're ending our conversation a little bit, what would you want to share with them, future generations? If we put your information or what you're going to say into a timetable and put it in the common and take it out 50 years from now, what would we want to say to these 25 years from now? What would we want to say to these folks in regard to community, in regard to the town in which we live? What would you say to them?
I was on the school board here when I went to the regional high school. I was a representative from Holderness. So I got to some back and forth with students and with teachers and whatnot. And it got me close to my experience in Boy Scouting for years, associated with Troop 56 in Plymouth, and before that I was Scoutmaster of the troop over in Holderness. But the message that I get from them is that New Hampshire could be a lot more friendly to its young people. We should be doing a little bit more to encourage our young people to stay here and not leave for better opportunities elsewhere. And although we are a geriatric state, we are old. Our legislature, I think, is the oldest in the nation. Average age there is very high. We need to be thinking more about what we can do for our young people. They need better jobs. They need better paying jobs. They just need it. And I think 25 years from now, if we put this into a capsule and 25 years from now open it up, I think everybody would say, oh, yes, we've done some of that.
Good.
We've made the state more friendly to our young people.
Good.
We have people young people would love to come back here, but they say, oh, I don't know, it just doesn't seem to be the opportunity. And other states are going through the same thing. They're losing their young people. I think that's one of the reasons why they're more inclined to have commuter rail come back to New Hampshire, because they're afraid it's going to take all the young people from Merrimack and Wyndham and Lawrence. They're all going to go into Boston where they can get better paying jobs. So.
I've never thought of something like that. And yet that was it was on the discussion table the last, not legislature, when our governors were vying for position.
Yes.
All right. I want to thank you for the time that we spent together today. Again, you're one of several that we hope to bring here to talk about community, the town of Plymouth, why it's such a special place. And when we talk community, what does that really mean? What is a community?
Sense of community.
Absolutely. And what do we have to? How do we become part of a community?
We heard this at BB River the other night. People are crying out for a return to community.
I think that's important.
What they want.
Yeah. I do my pitch every time I interview somebody. If I can, please do the following. Download pictures as you see behind us right now. A lot of you are taking the pictures, but we don't see them in printed form. Label the pictures if you can. And this is so important. If there's a story that goes along with the picture, you have a portrait on the wall, would you turn it around and write maybe something on it, patch it up there for now? Because I think the future generations are going to thank us for this. We're losing the stories. So again, I want to thank you for spending time with us today. You've given us some insight, something to think about, and again, why Plymouth is such a special place to live.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.